Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today. This is VR Download, and I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, broadcasting today with David Heaney in London. Some quick notes for new viewers. Myself and David Heaney meet here each week in this studio that he built to discuss the next steps of personal computing. I'm using Quest Pro right now with face and eye tracking. I'm not sure which Quest David is using, but we've got a global audience, and as always, please let us know where you're watching us from. We love seeing where everyone is watching us from. We've got a big news week to discuss and a lot to cover. David Heaney, what are we going to get into today?
Yeah, so I'm back on a Quest 2 again this week. Obviously, if you're a regular viewer, you'll know about our issues with the Quest Pro and Quest 3 microphones. We did see a comment on Twitter from Meta's head of VR suggesting that they are looking into potentially solving some microphone issues, but as to whether that'll solve the plosives issue, whether that's even possible in software, we just don't know that yet. But yeah, today we're going to talk about the Meta Q3 earnings call, where they said that they expect their losses to increase next year in their AR VR division due to ongoing product development. We'll talk about the fact that a record number of 52 NBA games are going to be streamed in immersive 180-degree video to Quest headsets for free this season. So if you're a basketball fan, that's great for you. We'll talk about Valve releasing SteamVR 2.0. Obviously, it was in beta, but now it's got its full release, so that big SteamVR update. We'll talk about the report that Apple is exploring using Vision Pro to detect mental and physical health issues. We'll talk about the comments that a Sony executive made about PlayStation VR 2 and how they see that in their overall strategy. We'll talk about Ian's article about VR fitness, and he had that great headline, "If VR is dead, why are so many people saying VR fitness saved their lives?" We'll list a couple of the best mixed reality games and apps that are available on Quest 3 right now, because we know that's something that people are having a hard time finding. Where exactly on the store do I find all of those hidden gems or the best things to try in color pass-through mixed reality on Quest 3? And finally, we'll talk about that big story that's in the title of the video and currently on UploadVR.com, which is that Qualcomm has said that they are going to reveal a new XR chip early next year, which may reportedly be for Apple Vision Pro competitors. So a chip even more powerful than the one that just shipped in Quest 3 next year.
Yeah, we've got our global audience out there. I saw someone out there saying they're watching us from Armenia. Thank you for tuning in. A lot of people across the colder areas of the United States. It seems like the first real cold spell of the season has come across the United States, or at least the northern areas. So there's a lot of people dealing with that in our audience. And yeah, I think there's a lot of people very excited to hear David Heaney's breakdown of this chip news that we've reported. The chips underlying all our current VR headsets are the engine of a lot of our experiences that we actually see and feel. And so it's going to be really, really important that we get that breakdown from David Heaney near the end of the show. And there are some very big things I want to discuss in context related to that. I'm noticing a lot of people are really loving tuning in and hearing you each week, David Heaney. So I really appreciate you giving us your time. It's really, it's resonating with our folks out there that they love getting the download from you each week. And we're going to keep that going as much as we can. And this week in particular, we've started to get sort of hints at what's next, right? It's funny, it's sort of ridiculous. Honestly, in some respects, the Quest 3 has just started shipping. People are just getting used to it. Developers out there are just pushing out their very first updates. We'll discuss mixed reality games later in this show, which are so important. We've got anyone from Figment XR, Vermilion, or Piano Vision. Love to see them in our audience. Tweet at them, let them know we're going to talk about them. And yeah, we'll get into that later. But let's first talk about this first topic of the losses next year for Meta. So Meta is saying it's going to have increased losses next year in ongoing product development. But David Heaney, your write-up about this subject in particular made clear that calling it losses isn't quite appropriate, right?
Yeah, so technically, in a financial sense, these are losses. If you look at this chart here, what this shows you is every quarter since Meta started breaking out their Reality Labs AR VR division in their financials, how much revenue does it make up there in green, and what is the cost down there in red? And as you can very clearly see, they are taking significant losses from this. But as we point out in the article, it's far more accurate to describe this as long term investment. And one of the reasons behind that is that more than 50% of this spending is on the development of AR glasses and the neural wristband input for AR glasses. So more than half of this spending is on a product that hasn't even launched yet. So there is a lot of mainstream media narratives around this being spent on Horizon, or some people would even say that this is the cost of putting out Quest. That's just not the case. Less than half of this is on those sort of things, more than half of it being on AR glasses. And so Meta's CFO, Susan Lee, said that she expects these losses to increase next year, even with the launch of Quest 3 and even with the reported apparent launch of a Quest 3 Lite next year. They expect these losses to increase due to ongoing product development efforts and investments to further scale our ecosystem. Now, to me, I think those ongoing product development efforts obviously refer to the AR glasses, but it may also refer to the cost of developing that Quest 3 Lite and what we'll talk about near the end of the show, Quest Pro 2, which Meta is reportedly working with LG on. So yeah, it's there's this. There was a narrative last year at some point from some media outlets that Meta was pulling back on its investment in AR VR and that Meta was getting a bit scared, but that is not the case. Mark Zuckerberg is still very clearly all in on this idea, and he is spending more next year, not less.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it reflected in our comments, people trying to figure out exactly what is the breakdown of this spend. What are the costs here? Is this portion mixed reality? Is this portion the glasses? What portion of this is Quest content? What portion of this is the R&D of hardware? Right, and all of that, those are completely valid questions because we don't know what the breakdown is. But this little sliver, the green one, right? I think about that one as what Quest Pro and Quest 2. That's what the green sliver is capable of. That's a little itty bitty green sliver when, where we are today. I would like to know what that green sliver becomes when we have the things later in the show that we're beginning to discuss, right?
Yeah, it's very important to note that this does not include Quest 3's launch. The third quarter, the final bar here, ended on September 30th. So it doesn't include Quest 3 launch sales. And yes, while pre-orders opened just a day before that, people aren't actually charged until the headset ships. So there's no revenue coming in to Meta during this third quarter. It'll be very interesting to see next quarter, in quarter 4, what does this green bar look like? Because that will essentially tell us in numbers that Meta is, essentially required to publicly report how well did the Quest 2 launch go, or sorry, the Quest 3 launch, I should say, go. You can see, very interestingly, by the way, I should point out that the biggest quarter here was not Quest 2's launch, but it was actually the holiday season after that. And I think I would argue that that's because, A, people who already bought a Quest 2 are now starting to buy some of the huge games that come out, and B, games like Resident Evil 4 were shipping quests, because at the end of the day, this is still mostly a games console and people buy it for the games. And there weren't really the content library on Quest 2 was a lot less appealing at launch than it was a year in. And I wonder if we'll see the same effect for Quest 3. So even if this isn't huge next month, what we really want to be looking at is what is the next holiday season when reportedly there may also be a Quest 3 Lite out there.
Yeah, and then you start, so people are looking at this and going, I don't think the green bar is going to get where Meta wants it to be. That's a completely valid observation to think about. But consider some of the things we're going to discuss later in the show. Some of the art, like the scaffolding of this platform that Meta is building in multiple product lines, in price points, all the way from the very lowest end possible to high-end devices to compete with the very best VR headsets out there. And Meta is just ramping up its preparedness for that in the next few quarters. So I think it's time to move on to the next subject, unless there's something specific you want to reply to.
Yeah, there's just one comment here from Playtest VR who points out that the content situation is actually a lot better for Quest 3's launch than Quest 2's because, as they say, there's Assassin's Creed, there's Asgard's Wrath 2, there's Arizona Sunshine 2, and they're saying Bulletstorm, and there's a lot of other VR games releasing soon. But what you got to wonder is what is in the plans for 2024? Again, that was really what will matter. What we saw was Quest 2's financials here fizzle out as it got further and further into its lifetime, because there was obviously the price increase for about a year. Quest 2 was $100 more expensive than it was at launch. And then there wasn't this kind of cadence of big titles. It looks like Meta had been holding back for this Quest 3 launch period. So it'll be interesting to see how that does with all these big games out.
Yeah, and I think I've commented on this before, but I do see sort of an A/B test approaching in terms of content. You've got Asgard's Wrath 2 and Assassin's Creed Nexus, both coming out in November and December. And there's various bundling opportunities. Asgard's Wrath 2 is already bundled with every Quest 3 sold. There's a possibility that Assassin's Creed could be bundled in various ways. We'd obviously have to see how that happens, but it's a prime candidate, in my opinion, for the Quest Plus service. We'd have to see how that lands. But Meta is known for doing A/B tests, and I can imagine them assessing, based on the launches of these two games, how much money of this do they put into games that they have made by third parties for them as exclusive relationships for multiple years, and how much content do they have made by their hundreds of game developers that they've acquired over the years, right? It's still an open question how much Meta really throws into that effort internally and how much they use external partners for that. Ready to talk about subject 2 then? Yeah, so Meta is streaming 52 NBA games this season. Those will be streamed in immersive 180 degrees to Quest for free. David, what else do you want to add about this? Because I've got context. I've actually been to an NBA game and wore a Gear VR in the stands of an NBA game to compare the real life watching an NBA game to what was streaming at the time to my Gear VR headset, which was miserable. It was horrible. It was, streaming Wi-Fi, horrible quality. But that was NextVR's technology, and NextVR is now owned by Apple. And that was a terrible experience to actually experience NBA in the crowd of an NBA game, just to see the gap in entertainment. But in NextVR's case, sitting courtside at an NBA game looks phenomenal. You can have cameras up here behind the backboards, and you can feel like you're actually in the action. That's NextVR. That is not what Meta just announced. And I wanted to be really clear about that because it's different, right?
Yeah, well, this does have that teleportation feature, but it is 2D. It's not, as far as I'm aware, it's 2D. It is 180 degrees, so you will see it. You will be surrounded by it in the front of your vision. You can teleport behind the net. I know very little about basketball, so if I use the wrong terms, forgive me. You can also invite your friends to appear as avatars beside you. I should probably mention the funny anecdote that when we were picking up this story, I know so little about basketball or the NBA that I saw 52 listed, and I said to Ian, "Oh look, they're streaming every game, every NBA game this season because for football, or as Americans would call it, soccer, that's roughly the number of games there are per season. But as Ian pointed out, there are multiple thousands of games per season."
Yes, I adore it. I love it. It's so we've got a global team at UploadVR. We've got David Heaney over there in London right now. We've got Henry over there in London as well, or in England as well. And then we've got Harry Baker over there in Australia. And then I'm in the United States. Kyle is in the United States. And we're frequently discovering little things like that we're just completely unaware of in each other's culture and homes. And it's constantly funny to discover things like that. I'm still discovering. If you go look up what a drop bear is, go look up what a drop bear is over on YouTube. And I have Harry Baker to thank for learning what that thing is. But back to the subject at hand. Yeah, it's great to be able to teleport between different perspectives for an NBA game. But as we're kind of joking here, 52 NBA games is not going to make the real fan happy. They want every game of their team in their platform of choice. One of the things that's also being added or worked on by some of these platforms is multi-view. That's part of this too, right, David?
Yeah, so, well, the first thing I'd say is 52, yes, it's not great compared to the sheer amount of games, but I think it's up from 5 or so last season. So you can see it progressing over time. And Meta, this is a multi-year partnership that Meta has with the NBA, where Quest is the official VR headset of the NBA. But yes, as Ian's alluding to, you actually, if this is free, there's 180 view for these 52 games. But if you're a NBA subscriber, you can actually watch all of the games and multiple of them simultaneously in a 2D mixed reality view. So you can be sitting here, and this obviously, when we saw this teased at Connect, this very much so gives off Apple Vision Pro vibe. You did in the Apple Vision Pro announcement, you saw a lot of these kind of concepts. But yeah, this is something that if you just want to watch the game in a traditional sense, you can have all of these other virtual TV screens beside you, so you can be easily switching between games. That probably should have given me a tip off that there were a lot more than 52 games per season. But yeah, this is something that I believe is exclusive to Quest 3. It won't be available for Quest 2 owners. I think I've just lost Ian there temporarily, so I'll have a look at the comments here.
Did we both get booted, or was it just me?
I think it was just you. Iron Meds is saying that you can also watch the control room cameras all at once. That's interesting. I guess that watching the same game with different cameras. I wasn't aware of that. But yeah, this service, this app that does this, also does UFC fights for UFC Fight Pass subscribers, and it does free NASCAR 180 streaming. To be clear, this is the actual immersive 180. So this is one of those use cases that you can see being really, really important to people. And if you had this eventual ideal headset that is comfortable to wear for hours and hours on end and very high resolution and has intuitive hand tracking, and you were able to watch every game in your sport of choice as if you're courtside, this is one of those things that's going to bring headsets into mass adoption beyond a gaming audience. This is the kind of thing that, if you combine this with the ability to play golf and things like that, this takes this completely out of the kind of current core games console and into a device that people would actually want to integrate into their normal lives.
Yeah, the problem I'm having, and you're exactly describing it right, but we've been through this story before, is I guess what I'm getting at, and it couldn't reach the scale and the quality to kind of break through and give people a reason to go out and buy a headset to do this with their headset. Like, it's not good enough for that, I don't think. And I don't think anything has changed with this offering right now. It's just something cool you can explore with your Quest headset. I think that's a good way to describe it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at the reviews of this app, and there do seem to be some people that love it, and there are people that did say that they got their headset for this. But you see that with everything. It's not something that a mass market would want to get out the headset just for. But if you're someone who, for example, you could imagine someone who is reduced mobility or homebound for a certain reason, and they used to love going to games courtside. You could imagine that this would be something that they would really jump on, or just people who, because of their general lives, are no longer able to attend matches. As you said, it's only 52 games for now, but I don't think we're too far off a future where this is every game. Is that going to be 5 or 10 years? Who knows? But I think this kind of live sports watching and events and concerts, it is obviously going to be a huge use case for these headsets. But obviously, eventually you want this to be sixed off. You don't just want to have this kind of 180 degree view that, when you move your head from side to side, the whole world moves with you. That is obviously the biggest restriction here. As Ian mentioned, Apple has acquired NextVR. So they may be working on something sixed off, given that they didn't show anything at the Vision Pro announcement event. That's something we'll just have to keep an eye on. But yeah, I'm very confident that this kind of live immersive streaming of events and sports is going to be something that's huge in the future. And I think it's really great how this app lets you do it socially as well. You're not just alone. You can actually have a private session with your friends. We should also point out, I'll just point out while Ian is reconnecting, I believe that Horizon is in Horizon, Meta has put a NBA World back where you can kind of play these different basketball mini games and watch the events and go to like a after match parties, etc. So yeah, there's obviously this big push here as it's the official VR headset of the NBA. I believe, they don't quote me on this, I think I've heard that Meta's CTO Andrew Bosworth is a NBA fan, so this may be coming from him. It may just be, this is his personal sport, so this is where he wants to start first. But yeah, not sure where Ian's gone there. I think he was having some connection issues. So I'll give him about 30 seconds to come back, or else I'll just start discussing the next topic. Iron Meds VR is saying that they used the NextVR a lot on Gear VR, so it's nothing new. In 2017 with NextVR, this is already possible. Yeah, that's very true. This is something that was possible. I think it's one of those things, though, where with higher resolution and more comfortable headsets that are controlled with hand tracking, it's just something that becomes a little bit more practical. But yeah, the big leap is going to be in the future when it gets 6 degrees of freedom. Other people pointing out that, for now, this is just USA. That is very true. This streaming app that does the NASCAR, the UFC, and this NBA, it is US only. Once again, all of us people outside the US, this is not at all for us. That's for a lot of features. One of the things I was actually complaining about on Twitter the other day, or X as it's called now, is that voice commands and voice typing on Quest are US only. You'd think English only, but no, US only. So you can't type with your voice in any other country than the United States of America, nor can you do voice commands on Quest or search with your voice. That's frustrating. And that feature launched 4 years ago, and they said it was going to come to more regions. Meta is doing the same thing that Google did for many years, where everything comes US only first. And I think Google got a lot of pushback on that for their Google Home products, because they're selling hardware products all over the world, and they kind of have reversed that in recent years, where they try to bring features out to other countries too. Meta still hasn't.
Yeah, it's one of those. I think it's probably a byproduct of the top-down rebrand from Meta on down, right? They need to redo all of their privacy policies in terms of use from the top down, beginning with their core services and beginning in their core country of beginning operating from the United States. And I think we're going to get into some of that. Like I always think of that, David, when we see things like just this week, the Rolling Stones rolled out a Beat Saber partnership, right? So that's new content always rolling out into what Beat Saber, and kind of the leading edge of that would be a global rollout. Are there countries in which Beat Saber content isn't rolling out? Because I think that's pretty global, isn't it?
Yeah, I think with music they're able to do global now. That's something that music licensees kind of handle. They have these global licenses, so they've managed that. A comment here: we forgot to say the name of the app. I kept saying the app because I don't really know how to actually pronounce it. It's Xtadium, so Xtadium. That is the app for if you're in the US to access this for free. I'm not sure how you say that out loud.
Yeah, so let's move on to the next subject. I'm going to leave on this note of just saying that I think I'm, as a person who's seen the NextVR content, who's experienced that in its best possible setting, I always viewed this partnership with Xtadium and Meta as let's prove out what Apple is going to prove out with NextVR, right? Like let's produce something parallel to what Apple's going to do, and we have yet to see what Apple's going to do, and I think that's something to keep an eye on for next year.
Yeah. So a question, just last question: are you going to attend any of these NBA games out of interest? Are you a basketball fan?
Yeah,
Do you want?
I have no interest. I have no interest in seeing the NBA via Quest right now, and 180 2D has no appeal to me. I'm a Bulls fan. I would maybe go check out a Bulls game, but I know from experience I'm not going to last more than 10 minutes. Right? It's not compelling enough to do that. And that's even 180 degrees 360 or 180 degree 3D from NextVR. Like, it's a cool concept. I'll spend a few minutes, you take the deep breath, and then you start getting bored. And I don't know if that this is going to change that anytime soon.
If anyone in our comments attends any of these, please let us know in the comments after the show, and we'll see what you think of it. But yeah, let's talk about SteamVR 2.0.
Yeah, this is a long time coming. It's years ago now. I think that Valve hinted SteamVR 2.0 was on the way, but it's here. and I think we need to sort of respect that it's here, acknowledge it, talk about what's in there, and not hypothesize too much about what's next, but still uh, think about what this means for the next steps of Valve. So, David, what does this actually do?
Yeah, as you say, this was announced quite a few years ago. I think it was either at the end of 2019 or the start of 2020. They said it was coming very soon. Valve time is a classic meme of Valve announces something with a very, very optimistic timeline and then it releases many, many years later. They're not the only company that do that. But yeah, this is obviously essentially a UI and UX update for SteamVR that standardizes it with the Steam Deck interface. So Valve has done all of this UX and UI work with Steam Deck. They're very successful handheld console, and they're bringing that all of those learnings and that kind of design language into SteamVR. And they've updated the keyboard. You can now use Steam Chat and all of your kind of friend group chats and voice chat within this. And the notifications are handled much better. It's nothing revolutionary, but it's just a huge refinement of everything that came before, and it makes PCVR kind of a great experience to use, because obviously SteamVR's interface had been feeling quite dated for a while and wasn't quite keeping up with recent trends. And yeah, it's great to use, but it's not exactly anything revolutionary.
Marcellus Wilson on the last subject saying, I really love the NBA 3D games. I never miss one. Totally get that. I would assume you're a big fan of NBA. Yeah, totally makes sense. But I'm not that big a fan, but also the 2D is a big problem for me. I would want to have a 3D experience. I'm also looking at the screenshot on this current subject, David Heaney. I know the internet went a little bit overboard. I know a couple of people with seeing this UI element here of two controllers being represented in the user interface of SteamVR 2.0, and then of course Counter-Strike 2 launching here, and people ran away with themselves, I think, with the idea that these two objects were within 3 inches of each other on the user interface, weren't they?
Yeah, there was obviously the potential that these controllers were in some way, a reference at the rumored Deckard headsets controllers. It turns out this is just what any controller looks like in this interface. These icons are not like the Steam VR desktop icons and the little kind of desktop toolbar. They are just generic controller battery level. And this was just here because it still shows you your traditional games you can play on a virtual monitor screen in front of you. There was a lot of expectation for what Valve might announce at the same week as MetaConnect. Some people were thinking this was when Deckard was going to be revealed. As you say, some people thought it was going to be Counter-Strike 2 VR, and it turns out it was a SteamVR UI update. And I don't want to negate that too much. I feel like I'm being a bit harsh. It is a great refinement. This is great to see. It definitely hints at them wanting to do something more with VR. I think some people pointed out that this was the first time they've used their Steam VR Twitter account to say anything or do anything in over a year or around a year. So I think, YouTuber, sadly it's Bradley, joked that they remembered their Steam VR Twitter password. So this shows that there is VR development going on at Valve, but it doesn't say anything specifically about whether we should expect that rumored headset anytime soon.
Yeah, it's funny as we talk through this news, I get more excited because you're starting to put more evidence together that 2024 is the year of VR, which is hysterical to say in context of my own personal reporting, talking to experts out there, and every expectation by everyone that this is the year VR is going to take off. But like when you start thinking that this helps Valve move to standalone, doesn't it? Regardless, no matter what they actually do, this is laying the groundwork for that, doesn't it?
You could certainly argue that the Steam Deck is a standalone device. This is obviously being designed to be a fully usable system that you don't need to interface with the PC anymore. Not that you ever really did with SteamVR, but this is obviously a more refinement. You can say that it's. I don't think you can really directly say that this is any evidence of that. It's still possible that Valve could choose to release a PC only headset, but it does hint at it at least.
Stab me right in my heart. Yeah, just break it into a million pieces. Okay. I think that's a good thing to leave off on here for SteamVR 2.0. I'd really like to get to these last subjects because they're going to get meatier and meatier. Any comments there you want to respond to, or should we talk about Apple?
James O'Loughlin asking what will change in 2024, and that was quite a comment. The year of VR. I would argue that 2021 was the year of VR. It was the year where going into 2021, almost nobody owned a VR headset, and at the end of 2021, something like north of 10 million people owned one. So roughly,
I think that's fair. And in your chart earlier laid that out. It actually missed the Q4 2020 quarter, though. I noticed, right? I can't remember if that was because of the Facebook.
It did start on that. That's the start of Q4 20. But as I said, it was the year after the Quest actually picked up as the content built up as well and the marketing increased. But yeah, people always say, when is VR's mainstream moment? I would argue it happened. Quest 2. The amount of times I encounter people in daily general life who have no technical background, who are not, early adopter enthusiasts, who when I tell them what I do, they tell me, my son or my uncle or my brother or my friend or my flatmate has one of those, the white wireless one. It's unbelievable. Like I'm in the barber the other day, they mentioned that they have one. These are just Quest 2 was the first mainstream mixed reality the first mainstream virtual reality headset. It happened. Now that's not the end result. This is an ongoing process.
Well, I like that. So
it started.
Yeah, so the first mainstream virtual reality headset is not the same as, standalone even, I'll add that moniker to it. It's not the same as the first great standalone VR headset. And this is the thing we struggle with as a publication and with our audience, and these people out there that expect us to be hype machines, and we're not. We're pushing back them because this stuff has so far to go to really become incredible. And we always want to have that reality check of just how far we go. And when I see this and I think about the stuff we have to go through later in the show, it's starting to feel like Apple showing up is a sparking effect for legitimizing the efforts of other people. So these companies that it seems almost like they were waffling, like Microsoft lost leadership, Google lost leadership and a lot of engineers. And it's now feeling, and then in the midst of that, Apple said, $3,500, we're shipping it next year, right? It feels like that's giving cover to a bunch of executives at these other companies to say, all right, let's stop waffling around here and let's get on the ball and make something happen.
Yeah, I think obviously I misspoke and very quickly corrected myself when I said mixed reality headset, but it's very important to describe Quest 2 as a virtual reality headset in this, because I think if Apple was trying to just ship a virtual reality headset and that pass through AR mixed reality was not a requirement for that headset, they could have done this years ago and they could do it at much lower cost. We are still nowhere near the first mainstream mixed reality headset. As much as Meta wants to describe Quest 3 as that, it's very clearly not up to the quality standard nor the price to be truly described as that. I think they were accurate when they described Quest 2 as the mainstream VR headset, but Quest 3 is not the first mainstream mixed reality headset. We are still far, far too early. Arguably, Quest 3 is the Go or Quest 1 of mixed reality.
Yeah, let's definitely move on to this Apple subject next, but I do want to address this comment from Mr. Horse saying mainstream is still skeptical of Vision Pro. 100% accurate. You are spot on. But I will say that executives at companies which compete with Apple are less so, right? And that's what really matters, right? So maybe the mainstream public hasn't sold on this, but there is an industry full of folks that are worried about what happens when people walk into an Apple store and see what this thing offers and wonders whether they can get that out of the competition. If you go as a person who's seen this and had this experience, you go and see what mixed reality pass-through looks like on this Vision Pro at $3,500, and then you go see something less, it doesn't feel good. So there's a market full of competitors who are coming to that realization. So Let's talk about this bit of Apple news that Apple might be able to use the Vision Pro to detect mental and physical health issues.
Yeah, this is a report that comes from the Information's Wayne Ma, one of the people who accurately described a lot of Vision Pro's features before launch when it was just a rumor. Released a very interesting report about the development history of Vision Pro. A lot of people after Apple's event last night have asked, why when Apple has just released M3 products, is Vision Pro using an M2? One of the things that Wayne Ma kind of did was to answer that question, which is that this headset was realistically supposed to release long before now, and it was heavily delayed because it is just such a massively complicated engineering achievement. This is arguably the most complicated to manufacture and at scale consumer tech product ever. I don't think too many people would disagree with that. But yeah, this new report is saying that they might want to use this to detect physical and mental health issues. So they will use the eye tracking and face tracking cameras, if this goes through, to detect your facial expressions, which could be indicative of depression, anxiety, stress, or PTSD. And Apple is reportedly hiring experts to look into whether this is feasible. The physical health example that the report gave was using the eye tracking cameras to detect blood vessel swelling, which can be an early symptom of heart failure. And so this is obviously an extension of what Apple is doing with the Apple Watch, where originally it was marketed for a bunch of different reasons. But if you look at the core marketing of Apple Watch now and all of the new Apple Watches that are announced, health is essentially the primary focus, health and fitness. Apple Watch can detect unusual heart rate, irregular rhythm, low cardio fitness, blood oxygen levels. It can detect falls, car crashes, and the newer models can even capture an electrocardiogram. So expect to see that push of health continue with the Vision Pro, because Tim Cook said in an interview a few years ago that he expects that Apple's, quote, greatest contribution to mankind will be related to health.
Yeah, so some very interesting comments here from people. Let's see here. Ross saying, yeah, I mean, if Apple
I think we just lost Ian there again. I'll just wait for him to come back. I think the comment Ross made there was, yeah, I mean, if Apple is a hit, it will spur VR development, but if it flops, that's the nail in the coffin. I don't think you need to consider Vision Pro as the be all for that. Vision Pro is the start. It is their first spatial computer, to directly quote Tim Cook. As we talked about on past shows, Apple is going to, at some point, almost certainly and reportedly, release a Vision Non-Pro, just a standard Vision that may be priced somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 reportedly. So that will obviously be open to a lot more people. Eventually, Apple is going to want to release glasses, although that project was put on hold indefinitely because, as we discussed many times on this show, the technology of today is simply not up to the task of shipping the kind of AR glasses that people expect from science fiction. There are so many unsolved problems that we at UploadVR don't expect AR glasses to be a serious thing, other than a few expensive early adopter products until the 2030s. This decade is all going to be about headsets, not glasses. But yeah, I think Vision Pro is really just the start. Yeah. No, Anakazi, I think Ian's just having connection issues. So on our tablets, we actually have like a little status indicator on the top, which will bring up any issues. Say your headset's low battery or running out of RAM or something like that. And I think I saw Ian's flashing, network connection issues. So it may just be an issue with the Wi-Fi network in his home. We should also talk about briefly, while I'm waiting for Ian, there was another element of this report that said that Apple abandoned full body tracking for Vision Pro years ago. And that was something that Ma had reported was going to be part of Vision Pro. There are these two downward facing cameras, just like Quest 3 has two downwards facing cameras. But what we don't know is whether that is something that will come later as a software update to Vision Pro, or whether that will have to wait for future hardware. it's very possible that Apple will release it after launch in a software update. Hello again, Ian. I think
Uh,
you're having Wi-Fi connection issues according to the little status indicator.
yeah, well, is it saying it now? Because, yeah, I switched to a Quest 3, and this will identify whether it's my Wi-Fi router over there causing us problems, or whether it's something in the Quest Pro Wi-Fi stack that is causing me nightmares. So let's see how that goes, and I'm sorry if we have mic issues. I will say that I lost my earbuds that I use. They're somewhere around the house right now, and so I actually attached the PSVR 2's included headphones into the Quest 3, and they're actually working right now. So I've got audio in either ear, but it's the hackiest setup possible. I saw this one comment that I don't know if you talked to. I think it was Geminosity I wanted to get to. Let's see. I want to make sure we talk about it because it was a useful, like there was a couple people expressing the same sentiment. Here's this fitness app in VR saying, "Congrats, you burned 194 calories today. Also, you might have depression." And it's a very funny sentiment, but it's actually describing what is possible to surface from your movement tracking data in VR, all of your body tracking data. And these companies, Apple, Meta, and others, are going to have to decide their privacy policies, their user policies. And the ironic thing to me, David, is like they're going to have to hire experts in these subjects to go back and do these things in 6 months' time because they didn't have all of their um, ducks in a row to have this sensor suite necessarily compete with what Apple Vision Pro is doing. So, like one of the things I wonder this a lot about the slow rollout of information from Apple. How much of it is just Apple hasn't done it yet, and how much of it is let's keep the secrets until it's too late for our competitors to compete. But yeah.
Yeah, I think WWDC, the event earlier this year where Apple released or announced Vision Pro, was so detailed that I don't really see that happening. It went into the details of the hardware and the software and the SDKs, and it felt like they were really trying to get the development community on board. And it doesn't make sense to keep things from developers if they would be core features. So I don't think we're going to see any crazy surprises at launch. But as I said before, and as you've pointed out many times, Apple has a long history of releasing software updates after the release of their devices. And the last thing I'm going to say on this Apple topic is on the general skepticism around Apple products each time. We have some of our comments saying, this will flop or, this isn't going to work. People said that about pretty much every major Apple product. There was huge skepticism about the iPhone, about the iPad, about the Apple Watch, massive skepticism about AirPods, which are now, you see them on every street, and I think they're the most popular audio device in the world. There was, on the contrary, there was a Apple product that flopped, essentially the HomePod. They're seeing a little bit of a success now with the HomePod Mini, but still, they are a distant third to Amazon and Google in the smart home space. So it doesn't mean every Apple product line is going to work, but the vast majority of times it does. And I think they're introducing such a revolutionary software approach in Vision Pro that this has a good chance of success. I don't think that the actual magic of Apple's Vision is their hardware. Like, yes, it's impressive, but I think even if they released Quest 3 level hardware, but it ran Vision OS, it would still be for augmented reality and for general usage of, iPhone and iPad apps and using all of this kind of approach of the shared space with multiple AR apps, a dramatically better experience to Meta, because Meta's huge weakness in this space has always been their software.
Yeah, and there's a lot to go off on there. I don't know if this is the week to really go off on a tangent and really go into what Apple might do, but like it's it's like catnip for us. It's really tempting for us to just go into these subjects of just how are they going to put this all together. But I want to paint this picture for our users out there that I want to build on everything David Heaney just said. This is an incredibly hard device to ship. And people are looking at it going, it's shipping with an M2. And we're building towards the end of this show. We're going to start talking about new level of chip coming potentially from Qualcomm to do some of what this M2 is doing. but we just came from the launch of the M3 line, right? Days before. And we want to know, what does the follow-up, more mass market version of this device look like? Does Apple focus on fitness? Does Apple focus on gaming? Does it focus on these floating AR apps and still bringing your PC into VR or into your space, but like, does it drop personas and the FaceTime calls? Does it drop the external camera? What's the name relative to it? How does this shape up for developers? What platform do developers have to make for a device? They haven't even shipped the first one. Why are we even discussing the second one, right? That's why we don't want to speculate too much about these things. But I want to paint this picture that we're moving towards the end of the show where we're going to talk about another Qualcomm chip, but there's every likelihood that Apple is even ready to follow up Vision Pro's M2 chip with another generation very soon after, to not give away the lower end of the market.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to, what will Apple focus on in future, it's going to depend on what people actually do with it. Meta is a very data driven company, but Apple is in a way too. Meta designs their products from the start based on this data. Apple kind of has more of a vision where they do the thing where, they show you what you want before you know what you want, but then they refine it based on what people enjoy. And like I said, with the Apple Watch, when it was first announced, they had a bunch of different use cases for it, and they were trying to, market it as many different things. And what they found over time was that what people really loved about it and what they used about it more than anything was those health and fitness things. So then every year when they release a new Apple Watch, it's all, here's how it's better for health, and here's how it's better for fitness, and here's how it makes you a healthier, better person. So I'd say that it depends, what will the early adopters do with Vision Pro? What apps will they spend the whole battery life in, and what apps will they run a few times and never use again?
I hate to talk about this as a place I don't understand, right? I'm going to talk about this as a user who is fully sighted and fully hearing. But I think it will surprise people when Apple applies all of their iPhone accessibility settings to the Vision Pro, and people are able to interact with a completely hands-free device without necessarily full vision or without necessarily full hearing, right? Those are the types of things that Apple has spent years and tons of engineers working on the accessibility features, and all that's done is made the pitch to buy Apple devices more appealing to a broader set of people. You have reasons to go buy your grandmother an Apple Watch if you know that the Apple Watch is going to alert the family if grandma falls down a flight of stairs. And that's literally been Apple's market growth, because they've already put it in the hands of all the mainstream adopters. Now they need to go and get everyone else, and it's all those little safety features that are the reason why people are going and getting these devices in the last few generations. But it's going to be amazing to see the accessibility features applied to Apple Vision, and that goes to your thing about the software being the differentiator.
Yeah, I think in the Vision OS simulator, you can see quite a few of those accessibility options already, and it does look very, very promising. Again, I think the last thing I'll say on this topic before we move on to that Sony comment is just, it is strange how Apple didn't show fitness at all at the Vision Pro announcement. That is the one missing thing. As I was speaking about when you were disconnected, maybe that's related to that lack of shipping body tracking. That they weren't able to ship that at launch. Maybe they're going to wait for that until they lean into fitness. Maybe it's also just usability issues about the tethered battery, because that is one of those downsides to the tethered battery. It's not as suitable for these high intensity activities. It might be something about making their safety boundary more robust. It's strange now, though, that you would not, if you had been asked to predict 5 or 10 years ago which company would be doing the fitness one, you'd be thinking it was Apple based on their Apple Watch strategy. Whereas right now it's Meta with, Supernatural and with all of the third party fitness experiences on Quest. And, they sell in the active straps and the silicone face pad.
Yeah, so I'm seeing in our audience, people are getting antsy, really wanting us to get to that Qualcomm news, the new chip news that we've got. We'll get to it very soon. This is not a clickbait title. We'll get to it. Please go and hit the like button. comment on our show, share it with others, get more people in here watching it with us. We are going to have some discussion of that new chip that you're not going to get elsewhere. So we appreciate you sticking with us as we build up to that, because it is going to be a big thing to have that chip coming if it actually comes to pass. But first, let's talk about Sony's PSVR 2 comments. So this is an exec over at Sony saying that PSVR 2 is important, but not the core proposition for 2023. Kind of an obvious statement, but it still kind of hurts to hear. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, it is an obvious statement in itself. They're just saying, they're reaffirming that it's important, but they're saying PlayStation 5 is still our main focus. And yes, this thing is something that we're investing in, but they're kind of setting expectations that they don't see this as, yet the future of gaming. They might do that in the future, but right now they just see this as a value add to the PlayStation 5. As I've always said on this podcast, that is what PSVR 2 is to Sony. It is a reason for you to buy a PlayStation 5 instead of an Xbox Series X. They hope it's one of multiple reasons, and that it outcompetes Microsoft's reasons that you might buy it. And even if you're not getting a PSVR 2 with your PS5 when you buy it, it's that psychological factor of, oh, well, if I pick this console a year down the line, if I want high-end VR, I pick up this and I can do that. Whereas if you get the Series X, you can't. The thing I would just say in general about PlayStation VR 2, we haven't discussed it on this podcast for a while, unless I'm mistaken, is that I think it's not wrong to say that quite a few buyers have felt disappointed by the content cadence from Sony. Yes, we're still not even close to a year in, but some of those big titles have been kind of letdowns. Firewall Ultra, for example, there haven't been the kind of announcements that people have expected. It's possible Sony has been waiting for holiday season, but each time there's one of those PlayStation showcases, people are hoping for, what is this big VR title, and it ends up just being very disappointing. The one company that is holding up the whole PlayStation VR 2 content, from my opinion, is Capcom. They are the company that is releasing, Resident Evil 4 remake and did Resident Evil 7. They are the one company that's just giving you their full-fledged PS5 games in VR, not a mini game, not a spin-off, just a full freaking game, other than obviously racing sims, but those are to be expected.
Let's move forward here a little bit to think about what next year holds, David, because I think it's interesting to think about the idea that this device becomes a low-end entry next to a wireless PSVR 2. Do you think we're going to get there?
No, I don't think that is on the cards anytime soon. If you look at the development of this, we published an article. If you just search UploadVR Sony history PSVR 2, this thing was in development for 6 years. It looks like they put a lot of time and investment. I wouldn't expect a new model of this for multiple years. We didn't see a revision of PSVR 1. There was obviously a very minor revision that solved the HDR issue, but what I mean by that is we didn't see like an inside-out tracking PSVR 1. It was on the market for a significant amount of time, 6 or 7 years until this came out. And yeah, unfortunately, it's so disappointing that this is a Fresnel lens headset just as all of the Pancake lens headsets are coming out. It's so disappointing to me that this thing is wired.
Yeah,
I think in the next year, Sony needs to. The next year is going to be make or break for this thing. Sony needs to announce some big titles to keep people interested and bring in new buyers. And I would strongly hope that they are going to do a price cut eventually. As I said when this thing launched, as I will continuously say, you cannot sell an accessory that costs more than the console. Just from a psychological perspective, that turns the vast majority of potential buyers directly off it.
Well, I'm gonna push back on David. He's got logic on his side. He could be right, but hearing the rumor that Meta might explore Fresnel for the low-end Quest Lite that they're thinking about makes me think about the possibility of Sony following suit in offering you a wireless connection to your PS5. But they need to show this investment in content in tandem with anything else they do. And to your point, they didn't update. Like the update they did to the original PSVR was small. It wasn't an architectural change like that, right?
Yeah, and this thing is $550. So what would the wireless version with potentially pancake lenses cost? Would it be $1,000? If any, this is Sony's already pitching this as the high end option. If anything, I would expect the possibility I think would be more likely would be some sort of PlayStation VR2 Lite, and something I argued at the time that they should have done. You should be able. It shouldn't cost $550 to get VR on your PlayStation. You should have the option to get a cheaper model that cuts out the headset vibration, that maybe uses LCD panels or a single LCD panel that you can get for $250 or $300. And I'm not saying that should be done instead of this. People, you still want that gorgeous OLED screen for $550, all power to you. But I don't think the vast majority of people want to pay $550 for this. They want it to be they want it to cost less, and that's where I think, if anything, Sony should be working towards. I wonder whether we'll see a price cut on this.
Hey, Skiva, hey, Kazi, everyone, Crispy, Thomas Ireland. I love this. Thomas Ireland, Logic, and David are the same thing. Yeah, that's a good description of you. Except he wants to be a jerk to me. Let's talk about fitness, because I think it's time to get into these last two big subjects. We've made people wait long enough. I spent my weekend working on this article. Worked on it some yesterday. Last week I met with Leanne Pedante, the head of fitness over at Supernatural. Last spoke to Leanne in this studio 2 years ago with our old avatars. It's very painful. I can't stand it, David, to go back and look at those avatars. Like, I just, it's heartbreak. Can you go back and look at those videos? I can't.
No, but I mean, I assume in a few years we'll be finding it difficult to go back and look at this. So,
yeah. All right, so I've got this interview with Leanne, and so I went and wrote this article about this interview and where Supernatural is. In addition to this interview with Leanne, we've run 2 headlines in the last month on Supernatural because they've effectively run 2 massive price cuts back to back. So as I recall, Supernatural used to be around $180 for a year. And let me just recap for people who aren't familiar with Supernatural and what it is. It's basically like Beat Saber, except it's tuned for fitness. And as you're doing your workouts that are tuned for fitness, you have a coach in your ear doing the workout themselves, but recording their audio as they do it, and telling stories, sharing anecdotes, and giving you a little bit of oomph to get through to the end of your workout. And Leanne is one of the most visible faces, voices in virtual reality right now. And I thought it was a fascinating conversation to have her in the studio to talk about the fact that she is, in many ways, the face of VR fitness. And really where it is. So I wrote this piece. It's up on UploadVR.com, and I had some fun with it. And I also, I think, confused people because I'm feeling fighty about this subject. I'm feeling fighty about the subject of VR fitness because I've just spent the last decade of my life telling people that VR is the future. We're all going to be wearing glasses, computerized glasses in the future. And they all are, everyone in my life rolling their eyes at me saying, aren't you a little too obsessed with this? And I get it. That's a perfectly valid point. But here, when I come back to them and say that VR fitness is cheaper than a physical gym, it's cheaper, it's easier to do, it's cheaper, and you can get the entire system with a fitness program in a box now for $350. That changes the whole conversation of like talking to a person who's never played video games their entire life and putting controllers in their hands and saying, here, go play Job Simulator. That's not the same thing as a person who wants to get fit or has had a horrible experience at the gym and now they can use VR as an alternative. And this discussion with Leanne was personal. She spoke to me as a human, and revealed her personal journey as fitness coach for this organization. And it's a fascinating situation, right? Meta is at Connect a couple weeks ago, and they have Snoop Dogg and others in this mocked up way shown up on screen with these celebrities' faces turned into puppets, essentially, for Meta to do its AI exploration work. And it's weird. People are looking at it going, maybe Snoop Dogg as my dungeon master would be an interesting thing. That's really weird. It breaks my brain that is what Meta showed off at Connect, and not Leanne Pedante and what Supernatural is doing to change people's lives with VR fitness. And then they waited 2 weeks later, a few weeks after this, to actually debut these massive, massive price cuts that make VR fitness really, really appealing package. Like it's kind of absurd how much cheaper and easier it is now to get into VR fitness than it is to go set up at a physical gym.
I completely agree with you that the way that Meta presents things at its conferences is not great. In fact, I would go as far as to say it's terrible. If you look at the Apple events and you compare them to the Meta events, Apple's ability to drum up excitement and focus on the features and cut out as much of the BS as possible and just kind of relentlessly go on, this is a new feature, this is how cool it is, this is what you can do with it, look at this, is just light years ahead of Meta's. And obviously there was that incredibly cringy, metaverse presentation at the first Facebook Connect when they renamed it the company to Meta at the end. And they got a little bit better since, but just the way in which they do it is so awkward. And as you say, they focus on these odd things that don't drive home the product. We also pointed out, why on earth didn't they mention Quest 3's upper body tracking in the main keynote? Why didn't they mention some of those other features that are coming later? Why didn't they drill down on the games that are available? Why didn't they talk? It's a very, very bizarre conference compared to Apple's, and I completely agree with you. Things like this, they should be saying, here's what people are using VR for today. Look at how many people are using it for fitness. Look at the people using it for gaming. Look at all of these people in VR chat using it for social. I'd like to see better marketing from Meta, which is really strange given that their entire business is based around selling people marketing.
Well, yeah, it's so I'm seeing in our comments people very opposed to the idea of subscriptions. It's interesting to hear that resistance, but then I don't know if they would say whether Quest Pass Plus or Quest Plus is not worth it, right? Like it's clearly a really fantastic deal if you're a regular buyer of Quest games. You're going to get some of the top tier titles. They've already put them in the subscription program. Like I don't follow that logic of like I'm morally opposed to subscriptions in general. Like, oh, give me a break. You're subscribed to something out there. It's This is solving a problem for people, is I guess what I want to get. That's a different thing than this. How am I going to spend my free time? And I would love so this discussion with Leanne, I put a couple big questions to her. One of the questions I put to her back in 2021 when she was in the studio was, had she ever been spotted in real life based on her role as this VR fitness instructor? And no, she had never been spotted in real life back in 2021. However, in 2023, when I just talked to her last week, she'd been spotted one time in the real world based on her role in Supernatural. However, she's also, Supernatural sells merchandise. She started spotting merchandise on other people in the real world. Now, you can go read my article, which is written like a sales pitch to somebody who has never had an inkling that VR headsets could be used for fitness in this particular manner. And so it is over the top, like, would you like to know more about this option? Like, it's over the top, but also like paragraph 3, what is the catch of VR fitness? What is and specifically of Supernatural, right? Well, the catch is you have to admit Mark Zuckerberg was right about virtual reality all along. And I think that's causing some amount of like crossed wires in people's brains where they just simply cannot accept that Meta and Mark Zuckerberg made a smart bet on virtual reality a decade ago. It has to be AI, it has to be mixed reality, it has to be AR. It can't be what Mark Zuckerberg said to us a decade ago is fantastic and going to change the world. He renamed his company Meta. He called it the metaverse. It's got to be this other thing. I don't believe any of that. I think if everything I just said is a position you have, you're missing the benefit of virtual reality, which, as Leanne helped unfold with me in this interview, as I'm asking her these questions, people go to the gym who are in sometimes some of their most vulnerable moments, right? They're wanting to initiate a change in their life, and they're going to a gym, and what are they faced with? Eyeballs. Eyeballs all around them, even their own eyeballs looking back at them in the mirror. VR doesn't do that. VR can do that. You can have a mirror. You can even have a mirror that shows you what you want to be. And there's research over at Stanford VR that they've done going back more than a decade that shows that sort of mirrored visualization can be a big part of forming a picture of yourself that's different than the one you currently have. So like this is science-backed type evidence that disconnecting, like there's benefits to seeing yourself in a mirror, but if you take that away and give a person space to picture something else, that's what VR fitness is doing for people. There are no distractions. There are no other people in the room. There's no gaze of other people. There's no eyeballs, and you just focus on yourself and what you came into VR for a few minutes. It is a perfect fit for the medium, for the technology. And then you add back in the mirrors and the gaze and being able to talk to other people about your journey. If you go to the Supernatural Facebook group, you'll see 90,000 people there, and they're sharing almost every day their workouts, their hard work with one another. They're going into VR, focusing on themselves, and then coming out of VR and saying, this is what I did. That's literally this like cycle of what it means to go into VR fitness. And it's working for people out there. Leanne and the other coaches that they're saying are people are saying that it changed their lives and saved their lives. And it's not just Supernatural, it's the full range of VR fitness services out there that are legitimately changing people's lives day in and day out. And I'm just so sick of hearing these other opinions, right, that are just not rooted in the fact that this is happening right now.
Yeah, I think fitness is definitely the most surprising use case of current VR. A lot of people, myself included, would have expected that this wouldn't really take off until we have much smaller and lighter headsets. I am sure that Supernatural power users are going to want to upgrade to Quest 2 or Quest 3 for the slimmer headset and improved comfort. So that's interesting. I think on the comment of subscription, the topic of subscriptions, people in the comments are discussing, the value of a real gym versus a virtual gym, and I think this is a lot more affordable than most physical gyms. Anyway, I don't think the price matrix is there, but for a lot of people, if they have very, very busy lives, even the transportation and commute back and forth from the gym is going to be something that you have to factor in the price of fuel for that. You also have to factor in the inconvenience of that. Peloton took off in the pandemic because of its ability to give you fitness at home, and VR is just so much more compelling. And some people, I saw some comments, very skeptical, very cynical comments saying, "Oh, push-ups are free, or just go play with a rock outside." But one of the real challenges to getting more and more people into fitness is to make it something that's appealing and to gamify it. And that's a good thing if you want more people into fitness. At the end of the day, if you just tell people to do the most boring kind of workout possible, that's not something that they're going to want to do multiple times a week and really get fit over the long term. It needs to be this gamified thing that people enjoy doing, and then it's not this chore. It's something that they actually start to love to do, and it's part of something they look forward to, and is having all of these positive health benefits rather than this kind of like puritanical self-punishment.
Yeah, and so let's leave off on the subject of workouts, and I'm just going to repeat this quote that Leanne gave me on the record. She said, "There's a few workouts in particular that I get that are a couple years old now, that I weekly get messages from people saying there were just these few things that you said at the right moment that kind of unleash something." So she's referring to emotional release that she finds through a workout in VR with this focus. And I 100% have had these moments in headset too. It's one of the reasons why I've accumulated even more faith that this is going to continue to just gain mass appeal, because I can count the number of times during a real life workout that I've had that kind of emotional release on one hand. I'm well beyond that in supernatural workouts, and I think part of the reason is that you feel so safe to be in the present moment. You're not in a room surrounded by people or surrounded by mirrors. You're super tuned in to what you're physically feeling, what you're emotionally feeling, and you feel secure because you have this voice of a coach who hopefully you feel like you have a relationship with, who's acknowledging your humanity. And I think that's a really important, safe place for people to have.
Okay, so given the kind of timing this week, do we want to discuss those top mixed reality apps, or do you want to go straight into the Qualcomm news? What do you think?
I want to talk about mixed reality apps. I think we'll keep it a brief subject because, all right, so Harry Baker, our games editor, very focused on games, he just spent a lot of time in mixed reality games over the last few days to try to figure out what the market looks like right now. We're going to keep that list updated. You can email tips@uploadvr.com or use the contact us form if you know about a cool app that we should really consider that's using mixed reality features. We wanted to make it easy for people to find out, if you want to go see what a Quest 3 can do with mixed reality right now, what apps should you go and check out? So Harry Baker spent a bunch of time doing that, trying some things that are just so-so, some things that are really interesting, and he's come up with a short little list of what to check out. So I think I just want to run through those real quick before we move on to that last subject that everyone is dying for. So first is, what is this? Is that Cubism? That's Cubism, right? Yeah. So they've got games here. I want to talk about the apps here. Let's see. So the apps are Figment XR, Vermilion, and Piano Vision. So if you want to go check out what mixed reality looks like on a Quest 3, those are the 3 apps we recommend you go and start with. So Vermilion launched in 2021. That's a fantastic simulation of wet-on-wet oil painting. You can bring up a virtual canvas, create some stunning paintings that can be printed out physically or you display them virtually. If you do oil painting in real life and you've used this app, it feels sometimes like it can hold its own. I think for some people out there, there's going to be real artists out there who disagree, but I think it's producing some really impressive stuff. Then Figment XR. Figment XR, I've seen the developer out there on Twitter talking about their reception and the work that they've done. They have been working for years at this, and Figment XR actually incorporates Tilt Brush into its entire platform. So if you missed the phase of VR when Tilt Brush was a thing, Figment XR is like Tilt Brush on steroids in mixed reality, and you can play with some really, really cool ideas. That would be my personal recommendation. If you're going to go check out what mixed reality is, I would go check out what Figment XR is first. And then the third one out there is Piano Vision. Piano Vision is a learning app for piano and kind of does Beat Saber for piano. You can basically get a sense of where yeah, sorry, you want to describe that differently?
No, I was just saying, I think just to be clear to our commenters, I think maybe they missed this, maybe your connection dropped. Right now, we're just talking about mixed reality apps. We will separately talk about mixed reality games after we're finished talking about the apps. So a lot of people are going, you've missed this, you've missed Demio. All of these things are on our list of games. We're just talking about apps for now. So go ahead and continue there.
So I'm going through the three apps that we can recommend right now. Yeah, that's Piano Vision, Figment XR, and Vermilion. So painting, piano learning, and just playing around with your physical environment. Those are the 3 apps that we recommend you go check out on mixed reality. If you're a developer working on something interesting in mixed reality, let us know. We will keep that list updated. And then there's the games, right? Now the games are tricky, and Harry tried out a bunch of mixed reality games. And the truth is that games right now tend to leave the world as a background for the content. And that's okay, but it's not the same level of play that we're getting out of Figment XR. It's not what we really want to see in in a really serious interactive mixed reality game. So the games that we have right now as really cool mixed reality examples are Synth Riders, Demio, Puzzling Places, Cubism, Drop Dead, the Cabin, Home Invasion mode, and that's where we would suggest you start off there. Demio is, of course, the role-playing dungeon crawler game where you've got a turn-based moves in front of you. You move a character down into a dungeon and try to win with your teammates. It's a really, really cool experience. They've done a lot of great work with mixed reality. And then with Drop Dead, the Cabin, Home Invasion, you have zombies breaking into your room. Puzzling Places and Cubism, both fantastic experiences with developers that have been in this space for a long time with cool little environmental puzzling games. And then Synth Riders, of course, is a rhythm game to compete with Beat Saber. So some great stuff there. You can check out the beginnings of mixed reality, but nothing there that really takes really nice advantage of your environment, at least not in the way that something like Figment XR does. In the case of Piano Vision, you can do the Piano Vision app with or without a keyboard, but it's much better if you sync up a keyboard to link up with the actual stuff you're seeing in VR.
Yeah, I think a lot of these are very, very early. So
I'm seeing people mention 11VR. I've seen we need to get into 11VR. I tried to get in there, and we need 2 quests in one location to really give that a go, and we have yet to really give that a go. But that would be probably one of our additions in the near future to this list.
Yeah, it's a great point. A lot of these games, as you say, are not exactly taking full advantage of your environment. They're essentially just replacing a VR background, a VR setting with your real room. And a lot of these games let you toggle that even in the middle of the game. At any time, you can change between, in 11 table tennis, for example, you can choose between being in your real room or being in a virtual room. And that's what a lot of these titles do. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that is something that is just going to be something you expect from Quest games from now on, that you can choose as you wish. And maybe sometimes if you live with people, maybe sometimes when you're on your own, you're going to want to go for that virtual one. And maybe when the people that you live with are kind of walking in and out of the room, or coming into the kitchen or whatever, you switch back to your real view so you can kind of be more aware of what's going on around you. I think it's a great thing to have. I'd say maybe Drop Dead, the Cabin, is probably an example of one that does take advantage of your room. As people are pointing out in the comments, you have to mark out your door and your windows for it to work. I guess Synth Riders kind of does a little bit of that, but yeah, Figment is the best example of something that really kind of utilizes your environment. It's kind of just like a sandbox playground for a lot of different concepts in mixed reality. So that's Figment if you're wanting to play around with that.
I'm seeing someone in our comments here asking about Walkabout Mini Golf, and Walkabout Mini Golf does not have mixed reality, and I am not to blame for that mention and for those people that have had to drink out there. Because
yeah, I'm surprised that it wasn't you mentioning. The commenters have mentioned it before you this week.
Yeah, they've been trying to lure me into it. They've been trying to trick me and get me to mention it, and I was resisting telling you all that I spent the weekend checking out Widow's Walkabout and enjoying the haunted house with my family for Halloween. I recommend you go and check that out because it's pretty cool. I think it's time to talk about Qualcomm. I think a lot of people have been waiting for this bit of news and really trying to understand where we are with this and what the future might hold. I'll be blunt that I think our coverage and David Heaney's coverage in particular is some of the best out there in the world, specifically on what the capabilities of the Snapdragon platform are going to bring for VR users, right? So you've got the XR1, the XR2, now the XR2 Gen 2, and he has been on the ball for generations now, really outlining what Qualcomm says these chips are capable of, what headsets Qualcomm says they're going to be inside, and then what reality actually, comes out as. So I'm going to leave it to David Heaney, and then I'm going to ask him some questions as he explains what we know at this point.
Yeah, so as most of you will be aware, the Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 has just shipped in Quest 3, and that's the successor to the original XR2 that was in Quest 2, Pico 4, Vive XR Elite, Lynx, and a bunch of other headsets. It was basically, if a standalone headset was announced, it was using XR2 until last month, when we now have this XR2 Gen 2, and that has double the GPU performance and around 33% faster CPU performance and 4 times the AI performance with 8 times the AI performance per watt. So that's a 3-year cadence between Gen 1 and Gen 2. And so last week, Qualcomm held their Snapdragon Summit 2023 event, and a South Korean news outlet, the Electronic Times, had an interview with Hugo Swarth, the head of XR at Qualcomm, and he told them that Qualcomm plans to reveal a next generation XR chip in the first quarter of 2024. So when I first read this, I thought, hang on, what? So you have 3 years between Gen 1 and Gen 2. Does that mean that next year we're getting a Gen 3 6 months after that? That would be a very strange release cadence. But there are 2 possibilities here that this could be. And Qualcomm, to be clear, confirmed to us that they are, in fact, announcing a new XR chip early next year, but they declined to provide any specific details or the naming or anything like that. So there are 2 possibilities for what this could be. The first possibility hinges on the fact that the XR2 Gen 2 is based on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which is Qualcomm's chip for flagship Android phones that is in the Galaxy S23 series, for example. Well, at that summit last week, Qualcomm announced the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 for 2024 Android flagship. So presumably the Galaxy S24 series will use 8 Gen 3. So the first possibility is that what the chip next year could be an XR2 Gen 3 that is based on the 8 Gen 3. The problem there is that these year-to-year improvements that you see in these smartphone processors are not anywhere near the kind of massive performance leaps that you get by going the 3-year leaps of the XR2 so far. If this new XR chip is based on the 8 Gen 3, you would only expect to see a roughly 20 to 25% improvement in GPU and slightly less improvement in CPU. It's possible that that's what Qualcomm is doing. They're just saying, you know what, if someone wants, we will make our latest and greatest architecture available for a higher cost. And then, yes, that's possible. The other possibility, it relates to the other thing that Qualcomm announced last week, which was their Snapdragon X series, a new chipset line for high-end laptops, Windows laptops, that is designed to be an Apple Silicon competitor, a competitor to Apple's M series. And so what makes this different to all of Qualcomm's previous chipsets, this Snapdragon X series, is that all of Qualcomm's previous chipsets used only semi-custom CPU cores that are basically just slight refinements of ARM's CPU core designs, ARM being the company that designs the CPU cores for all of these kind of mobile chips in a vast array of devices. They don't manufacture, they just design and then license the designs to companies like Qualcomm. But this new X series uses Qualcomm's first fully custom CPU cores, which is based on the acquisition of Nuvia, which was a startup that was founded in 2019 by former Apple and Google CPU engineers. So some of the same people who worked on those custom Apple CPU cores that are in the Apple Silicon range went off and founded that startup and then were acquired by Qualcomm. So you can see how this has kind of come to be. And these CPU cores are being codenamed Orion. So the second possibility is that we could see a new XR product line. Maybe, we don't know what the name would be. Say it could be XR3, it could be something completely different, but a different chipset line that is designed for high-end, expensive competitors to Vision Pro and uses these CPU cores that Qualcomm is saying currently in the context of laptops can match Apple's M2. Of course, Apple announced M3 last night, but M3 is a marginal improvement over M2. It's not something that's dramatically better. But yeah, we have these 2 distinct possibilities. What the report also identified was that this chip, whatever form it will take, whichever of these 2 forms or another form it will take, is going to be used in the headset that Samsung announced earlier this year it was working on with Google powering the software, and Qualcomm has kind of acknowledged that. But what the report says that Qualcomm has not acknowledged is that LG could also use this chip, And the reason that that's interesting is because obviously another South Korean news outlet recently reported that Meta was reportedly working with LG on Quest Pro 2. So it's possible we could see Vision Pro competitors from Samsung working with Google and LG working with Meta that are powered by this high-end Qualcomm chip designed to take on Apple's M2.
Yeah, I'm seeing comments all over the board. It was kind of cool. I could correct me if I'm wrong in the audience out there, but it seemed like our audience was pausing while you were speaking and just consuming all of your words on this chipset. It's, he spoke very carefully about this. It is a very tricky subject because Qualcomm has yet to formally announce, confirm any of this, and they have partners.
Well, they've confirmed that they're releasing announcing a new chipset early next year.
Yeah. All right. So we've got that, but the specifics, right? Anything specific beyond that, we can't confirm right now. And they've got partners making, they're supplying people or companies that are competing directly with one another. So they can't share too many details until their partners agree to kind of like unleash everything or unleash whatever they say that they can unleash. But for context that I don't know if you necessarily got across is that Meta and Qualcomm entered into a multi-year agreement to develop chip technology together. So whatever we're discussing right now, whatever name becomes, however it gets used, it's very likely that Meta is going to have first dibs or close to first dibs on using that chip. Isn't that right?
Yeah, so that's something that I'm thinking about a lot because yes, Meta has this strategic multi-year partnership with Qualcomm. Yes, Meta was the first to have XR2 Gen 1 in Quest 2. Yes, Meta was the first to have XR2 Gen 2 in Quest 3. But, the Qualcomm also announced that they were part of a partnership with Samsung back when Samsung announced its headset. That was, a triple partnership. Samsung doing the headset, Qualcomm providing the chip, and Google doing the software. So it's very possible that because Meta's focus is currently not on the high end yet, it's still focusing on, the mid-range with Quest 3, that perhaps the Samsung headset could be where this is introduced because Samsung is just as an important of a partner, if not more, given the, the Galaxy phones. If you look at the Samsung Galaxy S3, S23, sorry, it had a slightly custom version of 8 Gen 2, the smartphone chip that was, a slight improvement based on what the other manufacturer is supposed to get. So, we know that Qualcomm has said that the partnership with Meta is not exclusive. We know that they said the advantage is that Meta gets to design these headsets, but the report suggested that Meta's headset with LG would not be releasing this Quest Pro 2 would not be releasing until 2025. So there's a real possibility that we could see this chip ship from Samsung first next year and then from Meta and LG the year after.
Yeah. So what that means. So what that means is quite complicated, right? So for our viewers out there, we're reading tea leaves right now. We're moving straight into speculation territory with companies that can change their plans at any time. But it's looking like Meta is going to spend 2024 focusing on the low end, taking the XR3 and putting it into a device that's stripped down everything that's absolutely not
XR2
necessary
Gen
from
2, to be clear.
sorry
Yes.
what I misspoke. Yeah, XR2 Gen 2, sorry, misspoke. Take the XR2 Gen 2, put that inside of a stripped down Quest 3 that focuses just on virtual reality content, and potentially even strip out the controllers, make them optional, and get the lowest, most attractive price in the VR market. It's looking like Meta is going to focus on that for next year. And it makes sense because it does appear that they're trying to get it up to like a cadence of a new headset each year. And multiple product lines should allow them to do that, or could allow them to do that in this very near future. So a cheaper Quest 3 next year, followed by a replacement for the Quest Pro the following year. That's a very long time to let the Quest Pro even sit out there. We've already recommended officially buyers don't go out and get a Quest 2 because of this situation, because of the XR2 Gen 2 being such a massive leap over what existed before. And now we're talking about a leap beyond the XR2 Gen 2. So like if you didn't believe us before that you shouldn't go out and get a Quest 2, I think we've got even more evidence now that that's a really bad idea.
Yeah, that original XR2 chip is going to feel very dated very soon. I've already heard people say that Ghostbusters doesn't run great on Quest 2, and it really looks like it was designed for Quest 3. I imagine all of the big titles going forward are going to be designed for the Gen 2. And then obviously it'll be interesting to see how the introduction of this even more powerful chip changes that market dynamic. But you're right to say that that's going to leave, Quest Pro on the market for 3 years. Quest Pro is going to feel, well, maybe not on the market. It's possible that during Quest 3's lifetime, Quest Pro could be taken out. We did report on that report from the information that Meta is no longer ordering new components for Quest Pro. So once the the current component stock is depleted, they will no longer be able to manufacture Quest Pro. There is a very distinct possibility here that if the reporting about the LG partnership is correct, if the 2025 planned launch year is correct, there could be a while in which Meta does not sell a Pro headset, which Meta does not sell a headset with face and eye tracking for 1 or 2 years.
Yeah, so there's a couple things to consider there. So yes, that context is useful there, but there's the possibility that it could be relegated to a dev kit until the dev kits are prepped for the Quest Pro 2, right? So they could still get devs building for their face and eye tracking and mixed reality future that they've now had to like push things down a couple years down the line. I want to refer to this comment from, where is it? Thomas Ireland. A stripped down Quest 3 is going backwards just to get higher non-retention consumers makes no sense. I disagree with that sentiment because I think we don't know what they're taking out, number one. But number two, if they strip out the mixed reality, I don't think it's going to affect retention too much. You use the mixed reality, like I do enjoy it. It's better than Quest 2, but I still want to go into VR the vast majority of the time. And by all indications, they could still cut corners and go with a slightly different, slightly cheaper build and only sacrifice the VR part of the experience slightly. That's what we think they might do, right?
Yeah, I'm very torn on the possibility of Quest 3 Lite. Obviously, the big compromise that's being reported by that Chinese analyst would be the use of Fresnel lenses, and that is going to hurt the product. I'm in a Quest 2 right now, and it just is such a visual downgrade from Quest 3. It's passable though, and I think you could argue that the XR2 Gen 2 is more important. But yeah, let's read out this comment from, sadly, it's Bradley, who's an interesting point that as we've reported before from the information, Quest Pro 2, there was originally a Quest Pro 2 reportedly planned for 2024, but Meta cancelled it in favor of a more ambitious Quest Pro 2 further down the line. So it looks like maybe potentially, as Bradley is speculating, that the chip we're talking about here, this next year's chip, maybe was designed for that Quest Pro 2 model that was cancelled. And instead, Samsung is now saying, we'll put it in our headset, or maybe those headsets were supposed to launch simultaneously. But I think what is clear is that Meta's interest now, and Meta's interest for the vast majority of its time in VR, except for, one blip with Quest Pro, is on the low end and the mid range. They want to grow this market. They want to bring tens of millions of people into this, and they want to make prices as low as possible. It is not generally Meta's focus to make expensive headsets. The Quest Pro was the one exception.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting way of summarizing what the Pro was on the market. It's ridiculous that I don't have a tongue, right here a year and a half after this thing launched, and this face tracking has no tongue. It's a weird thing. I'm using a Quest 3 now because the Quest Pro bugged out on the Wi-Fi during our live show, and I don't even use a left-hand controller with the thing because I can't get the left-hand controller to pair with the stupid headset. The Quest Pro is extremely frustrating, and it's going to go down in history as a pretty frustrating platform, I think. And I want to point out, David, do you think they learned a lesson that you don't release hardware unless you have the software to back it up?
Yes, but I also think they realized that if you're gonna release a high-end headset, you have to go all the way. You can't just, it was the problem with Quest Pro in many ways was that it wasn't ambitious enough. It used that original XR2 architecture slightly modified with, the RAM moved off. It used, relatively low resolution pass through. The displays, while the local dimming was impressive, the resolution was a tiny marginal improvement over Quest 2. It need this, if you're going to release a high-end headset, put in high resolution OLED micro displays, put in the most powerful chip you can get, and it has to be more powerful than what you're selling in the mainstream standalone headset. I think what Meta has learned with Quest Pro and what they've done is what they always do when a product doesn't sell well. I think it's pretty inarguable to say Quest Pro did not sell well. It was cut by a third just 4 months after launch, and they have been recently giving them away. They were giving them away at Roblox developer conference. They've been giving them away to influencers and YouTubers online. Meta is very, very quick to cut something if the statistics show it doesn't work. Arguably, you could say other than Horizon. But the Quest Pro, it hasn't got that tongue tracking update. It hasn't got the plane detection they said was going to come. They said we were going to get something in between the manual setup and the Quest 3's completely automatic setup, where maybe it could detect your just walls and tables rather than actually doing a mesh, just your walls and your tables. That was supposed to be explored, hasn't come. I think that product is abandoned and dead, and is probably shipped far, 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 far fewer than Quest 3.
It did ship far, far, far fewer than Quest 3. That's not a question. The question
and that's
is just
why they don't care about it.
Like, how many weeks or how many days did they pull the rug? Like, I think, as a close watcher of Meta and like the way they do things, we saw it with Pico on the other side of things, where this news came out that Pico may or may not be backing out of the market. And you could talk to people who you could go, unless you go to China and talk to the parent company and hear from the executives there, you're not getting the actual information as it's been spread out through the rest of the company. And like with all of these companies, we don't know where everything is going to land in a couple of years, how these plans are actually going to come together.
But just want to be clear that Pico did deny that they're pulling out of ByteDance denied that they're pulling out of the market, though, as we discussed in our previous episode. You can go and watch. There's a lot more nuance to this conversation. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't think these companies have the solidified long-term strategy that a lot of people think they have. I think a lot of them are kind of winging it and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't and reacting in the moment. As Andrew Bosworth, Meta's CTO, always points out, Meta spins up multiple hardware products. So you have like multiple candidates for what could become Quest 3, and then the one that became Quest 3 was picked. You have multiple candidates for what will be Quest Pro 2, and the 2024 one was canned, but the 2025 one with LG may be coming to fruition. And so it is one of those things where they're building multiple things in parallel. They're seeing what works. The problem is, if you're a consumer and you've just spent $1,500 on it, that's not much of a consolation. I feel awful for those people. I do want to point out, though, that if you read UploadVR's review of the Quest Pro, we were very, very clear that very few people should actually buy one. We were crystal clear that unless you are a wealthy early adopter or a developer that really cares about building for mixed reality early, or face tracking and eye tracking, or someone who needs, face tracking and eye tracking for VR chat, you should not buy a Quest Pro. We very clearly said in our review that Quest 3 was coming next year, that would likely have a much more powerful chipset. So yeah, I do feel bad for people that did that. You kind of were warned.
Yeah. Let me see if let's go through the comments here as we move towards the near the end of the show. Please like, comment, subscribe as always. Let us know if you've got any last minute questions as we wrap up this week. We're moving towards the end of the year here with lots of big deals likely to drop around Black Friday, around Thanksgiving, to try to get people to purchase a lot of Quests and other headsets going into the holiday season. Any comments you want to bring up real quick?
Yeah, there's a comment from Nakazaki1 saying, "Where is all the awesome tech from spending tens of billions on research and development?" Well, as we pointed out at the start of this show, more than 50% of that spending is going to the development of AR glasses and the neural wristband to control them, which hasn't even shipped yet. But in terms of like, if you're asking what research and development is shipped in Meta products, the pancake lenses, these are state of the art lenses that Meta told us came through the research pipeline and into the product teams. Insight tracking, the actual positional tracking for Quest, a lot of the mixed reality features, things like meshing, and for example, all of these there are definitely things within Meta's research and development that have come down to their products. Hand tracking, inside out upper body tracking reportedly came from their computer vision research. Things like the hand tracking updates, hand tracking 2.0 was based on some of their machine learning, computer vision research. A lot of it does seem to be coming from the AI part, but we know that as of a few years ago, Meta kind of has this dedicated AI part of Reality Labs that is doing this AI research specifically to integrate into Reality Labs products like Quest.
Yeah, I want to go to that question specifically. Like, you've got to respect that Meta, Facebook, was never made hardware. They're not a hardware company. And so billions of dollars of investment is what was required to build that as a capability for that organization. And they had to build it to enough of the supply chain that one of their partners couldn't come to them and say, "Hey, you just bought 5 million components for your new Quest headset. We're actually going to charge you double for the next 10 million components for that headset." And now Meta, you saw it. Meta raised the price of the Quest 2 from $300 to $400 and blamed it on the international supply chain. We don't know the specifics of why they gave that obviously natural, obvious public statement on the situation, but that is the competitive nature of their business. If they don't control as much as they can down the chain of all the things coming to them, they're leaving their future up to another company to determine it for them by pricing things differently than what they can do. So Meta needs to build all of this capability down to even potentially the chip layer, which is, we've debated this. Is it better for them to go and build their own, or is it better for them to partner with Qualcomm? Well, right here, and as sadly as Bradley has discussed in our comments, is a potential downfall of partnering with an external partner rather than developing your own chip, right? If Meta walked away because they didn't have the money to spend on, like, it just didn't fall in line with their product cadence that they've arrived at, maybe a competitor got to go with this first.
Yeah, I don't think it was money that stopped Meta's. Well, reportedly, Meta would say its chip project is still ongoing, but I think it's quite clear from the reports that their custom chip ambitions have significantly downscaled. It's being reported that their AR glasses are going to use Qualcomm chips, that the next Ray-Bans will continue to use Qualcomm chips, that they wanted the current Ray-Bans to use a Meta chip, but what building a custom chip department that can build chips that are competitive with Qualcomm requires is a long-term vision and strategy and retention of key personnel and execution over a time frame that Meta just seems completely incapable of. Meta comes up with new ideas every year and completely reframes its whole XR strategy around it, and then the next year it goes chasing after the next thing.
He's absolutely right, but I have to leap off of that comment because we have heard what he's describing time and time again from anyone who has partnered with Meta on various ways. The people you dealt with at the start of your project are gone by the time you end your project. How insane is that? You've entered into a multi-million dollar deal with one of the biggest technology companies on the planet. You have people employed on payroll to deliver milestones or deliver something to an agreement with Meta. And then the person you're dealing with ghosts you for weeks on end because they're no longer invested in the project or they've been retasked to something else. It's think about the D-Link AirBridge. It's AirBridge. I forget the name of it. Because Meta abandoned it that freaking quick, right? They partnered with a hardware manufacturer to get an accessory made for a headset that was dead before it even hit the ground, essentially, right? That's what it's like to partner with Meta, right? And so can you imagine what it must be like to be working at the chip layer on things like this? Zuckerberg just came downstairs and says he wants this, right? Like that I have to imagine that's a discussion. I could be wrong. And they have to like have this partnership work over multiple years.
Yeah, that's what we have heard. There's this constant flip-flopping and changing, and just this, it's so frustrating how, when you think about it, Meta's platform could be so much further forward. The Oculus mobile platform that is essentially, now called the Meta Quest platform, originally launched in 2014 with Samsung Gear VR. You can trace that lineage, and if you want to talk about it as its own standalone OS, that launched in 2018 in Oculus Go. And if you look at what all of the Prime software that was there at the time of Oculus Go, all of it is being deprecated and replaced. We had Oculus Rooms as their social strategy, and then it was on to, Rift Home. Sorry, there was Rift Home 2.0 on PC, and there was Oculus Rooms on Go. And they never brought Rooms to PC, and they never brought Home 2.0 to mobile. And then they went for Facebook Spaces, which was PC only, and then they abandoned that, and then they went into Horizon and Horizon Workrooms. It's like you have this constant mess. Arguably some of the best software for these platforms was for the original Gear VR and Rift. Remember, you had that great Oculus Video, for example. It was just a great way to sit and watch videos in a virtual movie theater. You had that Oculus Social on Gear VR, where you could sit beside people as avatars and watch Twitch and things like that. The feature is completely unavailable in Meta's service today, other than through third-party apps. I can imagine the exact same thing going on in hardware, where, as you say, the person who was fronting the great project gets a job offer and goes off and works for another company, and then the new guy comes in, and the new person comes in, and they say, "Oh, scrap this. I'm going to start my own, special Snowflake project." And then halfway through shipping that, when they maybe shipped a basic version that's missing half the features of the old version, a new person comes in and says, "Oh, well, get rid of both of these. We're going to replace this with this super new cool thing." What they lack, and what Apple is great at, and one of Apple's greatest strengths, is committing to a long-term strategy and having leadership that is strong enough to say, no, don't go off and build your new shiny thing. Make the existing thing better and bring it to every user. And then let's refine it and build on it and build on it.
Yeah, Artful saying that it's Google's domain to abandon things. And we need to contextualize all of David and I's commentary in the respect that is Google, and what Meta is showing that even though all those partners out there that we have legitimately heard from, who have just been put through hell trying to deal with this changing of the guard at Meta all the time, Meta is still from the top down funding something, right? They may pull funding from this place, but they put it into this place. Google just takes all the money away and says, "Oh, we're going to go look at this thing over here instead," right? That's different than Meta like zeroing in where to place its bets every 6 months or 3 months and causing problems for partners, but ultimately for buyers out there. They're getting better products every 2 years, even though the old customers kind of feel a little screwed over.
I guess we should talk a little bit about, we've talked about Meta's headset with LG that reportedly might come in 2025, but, let's talk about what we expect to be the introduction of this new chip, which is the Samsung headset from Google. And yes, it's completely accurate to say, as the comments are pointing out, that Google is even worse in this regard, that Google takes this concept of, the new person coming in and starting their shiny new project and replacing the old one to an almost comical level, where you have that amazing website Killed by Google that lists everything Google has killed. And if you're an Android user, you'll know that the Google's first party messaging solutions over the years have been truly comical. It's actually it's so funny because you can't. It's just so awful from a long-term consistency perspective. So obviously we have to point out that Daydream, Google had a standalone VR platform, Daydream, that it abandoned like within pretty much a year of launching a standalone headset, and then stopped supporting the mobile version on their Pixel phones, and it fizzled out. And then obviously now Google is restarting with this new XR platform. So we also know that Stadia, Google committed to, and they were talking so much about, oh yeah, we're going to stick with Stadia in the long term. Don't worry. And then boop, developers learn from the news that their project is just never going to ship, that Google has pulled the rug on the whole thing. That, we know that some developers in the middle of building their Stadia game, they're sitting there at their PC building a game for Stadia, and someone sends them a message of, oh, have you seen this article? Google's just killed Stadia. That's the company we're talking about here. So I think that's going to be Samsung's biggest strategic risk when it comes to building this headset as a competitor to maybe Vision Pro or to Meta's platform. But the biggest strength of having Google as a partner, if this is as we expect it to be clear, Samsung has said nothing about the specifics of this headset. They have not said anything. Reportedly, it will be priced around $2,000 and aim more towards Vision Pro. Reportedly, it may not use controllers, but Samsung has not said anything. The advantage, if they do want to build a Vision Pro competitor, is that if they have Google, they get the Play Store. In the same way that Apple Vision Pro supports nearly all iPad and iPhone apps, Samsung's headset could support all Android tablet apps, and you would have cross-buy from your existing Google account on Android. That's Meta's biggest weakness in this market. As much as the entire point of Meta wanting to build XR so early and acquire Oculus back in 2014 and try to build towards this future is because Mark Zuckerberg does not want to be dependent on Apple and Google anymore. All of his platforms, despite the 3 billion users, of Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, they are completely dependent on the underlying operating system that they run on, which is Apple's iOS and Google's Android. The irony here is, as traditional apps brought into your virtual and augmented spaces become more and more important in these headsets, Meta completely has nothing to do there. Meta has decided that they want to focus on web apps, but look at how successful Chromebooks have been compared to Windows and Mac laptops. Very few. I actually like Chrome OS, but that's beside the point. Very few people in the market want a Chromebook when they can get full real apps on their Windows PC or MacBook. And that may be what happens when it comes to these high-end AR headsets. What's Meta going to do then?
And then there is, of course, it's kind of silly now that Microsoft is kind of like the underdog here. But they are still out there roaming and trying to figure out what to do. And there's this fundamental idea of like who controls your finger interacting with a flat surface to interact with these legacy apps, right? Can Android control that all the way down on the Google Play Store so you can interact with all those apps? And then can Microsoft hope to do anything over on Microsoft's end to have those classic apps brought into mixed reality? They obviously did that a generation ago. Can they do it again, and how? I saw people earlier in the show going, can we hook up a Quest 3 to Xbox in order to have something like a competing thing to what Sony's doing? We need to come back to this, that this reality here is that, like, unless a competitor can put together a whole package that's better in some way than the whole package Meta is putting together, these companies are going to try and fail again to compete with what Meta is doing. I can't help but see the story repeating itself. I'm seeing the story in our comments of just, you've got to have the software, you've got to have the games, and I'm not getting that picture from hearing about all of these offers, all of these potential things coming in 2024.
Well, I think it's possible that what happens is that these diverge into kind of separate options, and that Samsung and Google go straight for Vision Pro and they try to build, a high quality pass through AR by default experience with no controllers that doesn't focus on room scale gaming and all of the Quest content, and that doesn't play the likes of Asgard's Wrath 2 or Assassin's Creed Nexus, but does let you, play traditional games on a floating screen. The same Vision Pro strategy, whereas Meta comes out there with, as the gaming company. Ironically, there's been this, a lot of talk from some people saying, oh, Meta doesn't care about VR gaming, but arguably I mean, not arguably, inarguably, Meta has spent more on VR gaming than any company by far. And if they do continue to include controllers in Quests going forward, and if and Samsung and Google, as it's being reported, don't have controllers, it is possible that is Meta just kind of focuses on, we're going to focus on the physicality of spatial, the actual track controllers and interacting with objects in games and fitness and all of these kind of use cases. Whereas Samsung and Google do the same thing as Apple and focus on the kind of seated traditional computing, but in a spatial context approach. That would be a very, very interesting outcome. But I think a problem would be that still leaves Meta with no direct competitor. A lot of people want, and it definitely would be healthy for the industry if there was, a Pico-like headset that was sold in the United States. And Meta needs a competitor that is selling a $500 standalone headset that can run games like Assassin's Creed Nexus and does have track controllers.
Yeah, I just had a thought, and feel free to just discard it, and my commenters can feel free to tell me I'm wrong. But it's really odd to see Apple have things like Apple Card and Apple Pay Later, and them pushing out, them pushing you towards going into debt to buy their equipment. And to think of the idea that next year Apple is going to help you go into substantial debt in order to buy this headset for yourself and bet in this future for yourself. Whereas Meta isn't willing to take a profit on the hardware because they're betting that they want you to be a long-term customer over the long term. They want your eyeballs over a very, very long term. It's very much like, in my head, it's like, okay, you can look at the Vision Pro and saying, I don't have the money to spend on that. I don't want to invest that in myself. At the same time, the Meta is saying, hey, you know what? We'll make that investment in you. We'll take care of that for you. We'll give you the Apple experience for much cheaper. That's the way this sales pitch, I think, is forming. And it doesn't feel good for some people out there to think about it this way.
Yeah, I just remain skeptical that Meta can give a Vision Pro-like experience without that access of traditional apps. That is the problem. Even if Meta did have a hardware competitive, I guess it's arguable that a lot of people just use web apps when you think about it. As long as you have YouTube and you have the streaming services and you have a web browser, that's what most people need. But still think there's, people want, Snapchat and WhatsApp, and well, I guess they have WhatsApp obviously, but they want the apps that they interact with in a spatial context. But we'll have to see how that progresses over time.
Well, a good full-size 2-hour episode from us with some meaty topics as we really dived into what is in store in the next generation of personal computing. We covered our best mixed reality games and apps. Thank you so much to Harry Baker over in Australia for diving into the current market for mixed reality content, seeing what's out there. Thank you so much to David Heaney for his incredible work covering all the XR chip news we've had over the last week. There's a lot of things getting put in place for next year and beyond. Thank you to our audience, everyone, for tuning in with us as we unfold this journey, for trusting us. We're doing our best to stay on top of everything, keep you apprised on what you need to know. And please think about becoming a member over on UploadVR.com. Let us know if you have any questions. And also, one last tease here. I just spent the last few days going through all of our entries for the UploadVR showcase that we've got coming up in December. It is going to be an interesting showcase. I was looking through this content, and it's fascinating the way we've evolved, the way we do this showcase. We want to be a place where the smallest developers out there can premiere their content if they really want to, if they've got something interesting. And we also want to be a place where we can go and talk to the biggest projects possibly in the market. Well, we've got more than 90 entries that we will look through, and it covers that full gamut. It covers everything from these little developers with an interesting idea that's not well polished to very well polished, ready to release content. And we've got all of that coming for our showcase, and we're going to break up how that's going to appear. We're responding to all those people who entered for that show very, very soon, and then we'll have that for you in December. Thank you so much. Tune back into UploadVR.com in the coming weeks as we get you through the holidays and Thanksgiving 2023. It's going to be a big time. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks again, everyone. We hope to see you again next week.